So I'm going to start off by talking about the animation that Double Negative did on John Carter of Mars. I like to talk about life on Mars, which is kind of what we tried to create. The movie John Carter was, the visual effects work was split across about 4 studios in London. Double Negative took about 950 shots, and we largely handled the creature and character animation, mostly. Cinesite handled almost the same number, about 850 shots, and they largely handled the environment augmentations. MPC also handled a great sequence with the Warhoons, and Invisible is another company. And they came in at the end to help us finish the film. The company I work for is called Double Negative, and it's located in Soho, as all of the companies are in London for some strange reason. It was set up in 1998 with about a team of about 30 people originally, and it has since grown to over 1,000 people, making it Europe's largest provider of visual effects for film. And in 2009, we opened up a Singapore studio, and we currently have about 150 artists working out there. This is just listing all of the films that we've worked on and are currently working on. Over the past 12 months, we've completed work on John Carter, obviously. We've just wrapped up on Total Recall, Captain America, The Dark Knight, Pirates, Tree of Life, Attack the Block, and Paul, if you've seen that. And we're currently in production on Man of Steel, the Superman movie, Rush, The Bourne Legacy, and the new Bond movie, Skyfall, amongst others. But those are the only ones I'm allowed to talk about, unfortunately. Let's talk about John Carter. The source material for John Carter was originally taken from some books written by Edgar Rice Burroughs, who's most famous for writing Tarzan. He wrote it before Tarzan, and the John Carter story was first published in a magazine called the All Story magazine in February of 1912, making it just over 100 years old. It since went on to be written into a serial that was released as a series of 11 books, making it sort of a precursor to comic books, and very much the Harry Potter of its day. Since then, it went on to inspire a lot of celebrated authors and filmmakers, down through the generations, actually. And many attempts were made at turning this into a movie. The very first attempt was made by an animator called Bob Clampett in 1931, but it was deemed a little bit too outlandish for the audience at the time. Ray Harryhausen took a shot at it in 1958 when he was wrapping up on Sinbad. And then that failed to take off. In the 80s, John McTiernan, the director of Die Hard, tried to make it into a film, followed by Kerry Conran, Robert Rodriguez, and most recently Jon Favreau tried to make it before he hit some issues with how to create the visual effects. So it was very much a movie that needed time to pass and technology to develop before we could tackle it. The director of the film is Andrew Stanton, who you probably know as the director of Wall-E, Finding Nemo, one of the key story minds of Pixar, very much involved in the Toy Story series of films. Andrew collaborated with Michael Chabon and Mark Andrews, who's the current director on Brave, which is Disney Pixar's latest animated film. And those guys came on in the beginning to help develop the screenplay and develop the story. One of the things that Andrew was really kind of enthusiastic about was how we were going to film this, and what was really important to him were eye lines. And I think you can see there you've got Willem Dafoe on stilts and a mysterious green person that always tends to show up in these visual effects films for some strange reason. It's a lovely outfit, isn't it? It's really revealing. The main thing that Andrew really wanted us to focus on was making sure that the eye lines were correct. We knew we were going to have an uphill struggle to create digital characters and make them look real and integrated. But if the real person in the plate, John Carter, wasn't looking in the right place or didn't react appropriately to the performance, then no matter how good a job we did on integration, it would never feel like they were really there. So we always made sure that we had methods in place to shoot our actors such that the Thark actors' eyes were in the correct place. And then we would make sure our animation lined up to that. So early on, one of the very first things we decided to do was let's shoot a test, try to animate it, and create all of the possible situations we were going to find on the real film, and see where the gaps were in our pipeline, our methodology, and our tools. So this is quite a rare little thing you're going to see. I don't even think it's on the DVD, but let's take a look at it. So this test doesn't feature any of the actors.
Have you wondered why I spared you, Carter?
I have at that. Yes.
It is because I wish to believe a thing as strange and unique as you must have a place.
Can that make sense to my Dotar Sojan?
Yeah.
My people had a place once. In the beginning, a fighting spirit ruled Barsoom. But somewhere the green men lost their way. Now we scrounge the sands like packs of wild calots, and I grow weary.
It's gonna be okay, buddy. What? It's called a hug. People like them on Earth.
Cool. You can leave the lights up, actually. So what you're seeing here is the clean plates, what we actually got to work from, and you'll see how we shot it. And sometimes the guy's on stilts, sometimes he's on a crate. We knew we wanted to capture the facial performance of the actors. So it really, we came out of this test with more questions than answers necessarily. We also knew that this was going to be a test of our pipeline. So all of the muscle work and the skin and the facial was all done in the most brute force way possible. And we knew that our pipeline was going to be tested, and it was, and it turned out to be really leaky. It didn't hold a lot of water. So the first thing we did was laid out a whole bunch of things that we needed to do to make sure we could do not just one character, but thousands of Tharks, plus all of the other creature work in the film. We knew that sometimes we'd shoot with clean plates where there was no actor there at all. Other times we were removing stuff. Other times combining takes from earlier plates and mixing them with better takes for the live action part, and so forth. So we learned a lot from this test. And also we developed a good relationship with Andrew, and we sorted out our very early methodologies for showing him work, visual effects work in such a fashion that he was comfortable with it. And again, one of the things I'll bring up right now is that there was a lot of talk in the beginning on the show within the visual effects world as to how it was going to work out with a director from Pixar. Because he's an animation director, a lot of people rolled their eyes and thought this is going to be difficult. He's going to have to get used to this. The interesting thing was it really wasn't a problem at all. Andrew came in extremely well prepared, knowing exactly what he wanted. He'd storyboarded everything. He knew how to direct animators as well as other artists. And he quickly allayed any fears that he was going to force us to work in a very Pixar-like fashion. And it worked out really well. One of the first things we did before we shot anything was about 2 weeks before principal photography started, we flew in the actors who played Tharks and invited them to take part in Thark Camp, which was an opportunity for them to try out the stilts and all of the other methodology that we were going to use on set. And allowed them to kind of, we set up VR goggles, and we gave them a chance to see themselves captured and instantly see what their motion looked like on a Thark rig. Here you'll see, this is video of Willem on the first day. You can see he's on wires. The guy standing around him there to make sure he doesn't get hurt when he falls. And then very quickly, on the second day, he was off wires, extremely mobile. He'd already been practicing, and it was really hard to get him off the stilts. He just wanted to be on stilts all the time. Thomas Hayden Church also really great on stilts, very athletic. They were playing basketball on stilts, running around. It was fantastic. So, but not everybody was comfortable on stilts. Samantha Morton wasn't very comfortable up high, and she'd had a child, I think, recently, so she was quite nervous about it. But we had to figure all these different methodologies that were appropriate for filming on set and in the desert. And that was a chance to try out those things. One of the first creatures we animated before we actually shot any plates was a creature called a thoat. We needed to do this because we had to supply our on-set team with a mechanical rig that could mimic the motion of the thoat. So the animation had to be done first. The thoats themselves are beasts of burden, indigenous to Mars, 4 legs, massive creatures. And, we had to try to solve the animation quite quickly in order to create that rig. So we started off looking at a bunch of different creatures as reference, and we settled on camels because they're sand-bound creatures, and we found that by mimicking their motion, it didn't become instantly recognizable on a thoat, whereas we'd done some tests on a horse, and it looked exactly like a horse because everybody's really familiar with that type of motion. We looked at elephants, too slow for our script, and we looked at rhinos, and they're too stiff, and so a camel gave us something to work from. And once we decided on that, Andrew was really happy because he's a big fan of Lawrence of Arabia. It's his favorite movie, and he thought that was a really good sign. So we decided that we would try to accurately capture a camel. So we made a suit. It looks like a ninja camel, right? And we covered it in ping pong balls, and we captured it to see how that motion would translate. This is what it looked like. It's very slimming, isn't it? Black, very slimming. There we go. So we did that, and then we transferred it onto our rigs, created the animation in order to have on set these mechanical rigs replicate our animation. After it was shot, it would come back to us. We'd add the animation that we did earlier back underneath these saddles and try to blend the two together. Let me give you some ideas of how we did that. So on the bottom right, you can see clean up motion capture animation. And then on the other 3 images, you can see the saddle motion has been extracted. From that, we were able to tell how far it moved in space, what its rotation values were, the speed, and so forth, for a variety of different types of motion. That then went off to Chris Corbould, who I think won an Oscar for his work on Inception. And he created the mechanical rigs, and his team did a fantastic job. They used petrol-driven vehicles and removed all of the motors and put in electric motors because we needed to record sound at the same time as using these. So they had to be extremely quiet, but also had to get to about 40 miles an hour. Let's get on to a breakdown reel. This will show you some of the development tests, rough and clean, that went into finding out how to make these thoats move. Yes. I don't, but I suspect it was probably about 3 months. Yeah. What we found with this test was the thoats are quite bovine, quite sort of bland creatures. They weren't, they're used for transport. And we found that by showing other characters treating them badly, it gave you a sense of what their life was like. And that's how we kind of narrowed it down to the look that we ended up with. This is motion capture cleanup, and we ended up ditching it and going with keyframe because the leg motion became quite complicated to manage. And the animators ended up here. So this is a heavier, slower, stronger feeling creature than the camel was giving us. This shows you an idea of how we broke down the shot. That's all we kept. Quite a lot of work to integrate them back into the plate. And there you go. Very good. Woola is, let's see if he shows up. There he is. Some early artwork on Woola. Woola is a sort of a halfway house between a creature and a character in the film. He becomes John Carter's sidekick in the film. Again, he's an indigenous creature to Mars. He's got 10 legs, why not? And he can move like the Roadrunner, extremely fast, but he's huge. So we first decided that we needed some representation of Woola on set. So Andrew made us audition the animators. So we made up a really simple mock-up of the creature's head, and we had all of our animators test out for the role.
Hey, Woola. Here, Woola. Hey, boy. How are you? You want to play? You want to play with us?
So we sent all these videos to Andrew, and he picked the people that he liked the best.
Good boy.
And we ended up with a combination of an animator and a performance artist.
Yeah, excited.
Jones, who's a puppeteer. And he was going to be on set anyway, but he was sort of the least shy. And this is Todd Ridley. And he would do crazy stuff on set, which we thought was really inspiring. And we combined it with a really talented animator who's very detail focused. And the combination of the two, I think, worked great for the movie. This is a breakdown reel. Woola had to be at the same time quite docile. He's a guard dog, but he is also quite fierce later on in the film. And I think one of the things we did early on was just, work out how the motion of the legs would work. It was quite a tricky thing to do. We found that animating him running was a little bit pointless because you never got to see it once you applied blur. But we found that making him stop and having him slide told you how fast he was moving beforehand. So you got to catch up with the idea of how fast he could move. These are some very, very early tests exploring the character of the creature. That's us in the basement just testing out how his size relationship would work to a human. Making him a very simple creature seemed to make everybody fall in love with him. He's a creature that can only focus on one thing at a time, like most men, actually. And here's some shots from the film. And all he really wants to do is play. We explored making him slightly cartoony. We found that actually kind of hurt the process. We wanted him to feel like when you look at your own pet, like your cat or your dog, and you project anthropomorphic ideas onto what their behavior is, and you fill in a gap, and that makes you humanize them in your head. If you're too explicit with that as an animator, when you're animating in a realistic style, I think the audience pulls away from it and it feels fake. So in scenes like this, we just looked at real animals and what they would do, and we found that dogs were a great reference because they're very simple creatures. There you go. And that's Woola. Tharks made up the bulk of our work for John Carter. And the Tharks are, again, they're indigenous to Mars. 4 arms, 2 legs. They're Viking warriors. Very, very old race, and we had a lot of fun exploring those characters. But we also had the great luxury of having Willem Dafoe, Samantha Morton, Thomas Hayden Church, Polly Walker, all playing these as characters in the film, and their performance really educated us as to how we would animate them. So we filmed them, and we did not motion capture them on set. We did capture their facial, which I'll show you a little bit later on. But we really just used their body motion as reference. But the animators then worked up that animation on top. Let's take a look at a clip.
the hell am I? What the? Atuje.
Nartu heb nun tala, Jedek.
Engelel!
Eor! Jatet katub! Geor! Jatet! Satav! Satav! All right. You've got me. I surrender. Jedak. 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 Tars Tarkus. Tars Tarkus. Captain John Carter, Virginia. 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 No. My name is John Carter. I'm from Virginia. Virginia. Sock. Solid sock kachach. Sock. Sock pa. Sock. 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 Yes, sir. Virginia! Virginia! Solomon Pop! Shot it!
When we set about to create these characters in CG, we knew that our rigging department would have to get really strong, and it wasn't at the beginning of the show. We're a much smaller team. And what was kind of cool over the process of making this film was, as an animator, was watching the TDs and the riggers kind of become animators in the same way that, following the same process that we did. They started studying reference, they started filming themselves, they started doing all this sort of artistic stuff. And they really became a lot stronger as a department. Rigging is the term, for those of you that are not familiar with CG terms, used to describe the method of applying controls to the model that we animate. They basically create a digital puppet. And they basically had a renaissance within the department. They kind of used classical anatomy in a number of different ways. We use it to guide our creature design. So we inherited designs from Legacy, and they're brilliant designs, but it's not until you actually have to put a rig inside a model and move it do you start to realize if that design's going to hold up. Very often designs are done either as a flat art or a 3D model, but when you move it, you start to realize, well, that muscle system isn't going to work. That's just made up. We needed to make things more sensible. We need to make sure the mesh behaved the correct way, and so forth. So using classical anatomy terms kept everybody honest and on the same page. We used it to educate the artists. Every TD that came on the show went through a week-long anatomy course. We hired specialists in anatomy. We used it in the naming conventions for our tools, as well as our rigging. And it gave us a ready-made language, that animators and riggers could all talk the same way, which is really useful. In terms of reference, they asked me to take my shirt off. So I said, okay. And yeah, time's not been kind to me. So we used an awful lot of reference, and we developed a whole bunch of different systems to create muscles, skin sliding, and a whole ton of stuff that I don't have time to go into in this particular lecture. But at the same time, the riggers are also responsible for giving the animators a sort of a stripped down, light version of this rig so they can animate in real time. So they have to manage what the animators need, plus adding all of this extra technical, sensible stuff, and make sure that it gets rendered as well. This is another close-up just demonstrating skin sliding. So you can see that, the muscle is bulging as it would normally. We also introduced sort of two meshes to give it a very simple kind of explanation. One mesh is moving as the muscles bulge and the arm contracts, and the second mesh tells it to go back to its previous shape. And that's what kind of fakes the sliding. We also added gristle maps to make sure the muscle structure and fibers were kind of visible through the skin, and it didn't look too perfect. And the guys did a huge amount of work on this as well. Tendons used a slightly different technology. We used tendons all over the body. Basically, our goal was to keep the mesh for the animators as light as possible. So we went away from what some other studios use, which is a very dense piece of modeling where you can pull detail out as you go along. We decided against that because we felt at the time, right or wrong, it could slow down our system. So we came up with smart ways. This is using a wire under the skin that pulls out automatically, measuring when rotations happen. It automatically brings in a piece of animation that says fire quickly, because tendons are like steel cables. So they go really tight very fast. They don't sort of slowly tighten. And that's what gives them their material quality. So the riggers would check with the animators all the time to see how, not just how things should look when they change shape, but how the timing should be, what the material quality is, and what tricks they could use in animation terms. It's quite an expensive thing to do in terms of rendering. So all of this tended to get done at the end of the pipeline. Here's an example of a scene. On the bottom right of the camera, you'll see a little small version of the shot, and you'll see the character's got little colored areas on his body. Each one of those areas refers to a muscle group, which is a group of muscles designed to move or change something. So for example, you can see his deltoids, see his pecs as one color, when in fact it might be 3 or 4 muscles within that group designed to activate that arm. But we didn't want to have to hand animate 150 muscles each time, so we tend to do them as groups. But what you're seeing is hand animation that the riggers did based on top of the animator's animation, which is what the main body of the action is as he swings that sword around. The muscles are then animated on and off, and each color, as they flash on and off, is telling you when they show up. And it's really obvious in his forearm. If you see it as it catches the light, you can feel the muscles tense as he holds the sword. What we liked about the approach was we would tend to over crank the animation in the beginning to the point where it was really obvious, and then we backed away from it. So it became less obvious, but you still felt it, and it gave you a sense of complexity in the textural nature and of the body. So on the forearm, for example, you've got lots and lots of very tight muscle, very little fat. The upper arm tended to have a little bit more flex in it and a bit more sag on some of the muscles, but very similar to here. Chest was different, the abs are different, the back tended to be very, very firm. You tend to see a lot of tendons in here, and the neck is a very complicated area. So all of this was animatable, and the riggers did this on top of what the animators did. It was quite a complicated process. Here's another example. If you watch when she leans against the wall, you can see her thigh muscles tighten and her abs tighten. This is a very flatly lit shot. It's mostly lit as bounce lighting coming off the wall. And but you can still kind of feel the tension in her body. If you look down around her ribs, you can really see all of the muscles being fired, and you can see it in the render on the right side. This one shows off the neck.
Go for campagne open
You can see
tutti
the
adwam.
rigger was
Go
keying
for
all of the
campagne
muscles at
open
different points
tutti adwam.
to create
Go
that.
for campagne open tutti
The riggers would actually, they'd have video reference of what the actors did on set. Then they would go and shoot themselves on video, saying the line and filming their necks, bring that up and match that as reference. And then we'd look at it in dailies, and then we'd talk about toning stuff up or down, depending on how much we saw it. What we felt as animators was it was really important to do this stuff in the neck, because typically, as an animator, having worked on cartoony stuff and realistic stuff, in the cartoony world, we tend to drop that stuff away and not deal with it at all, because it's not particularly pleasing to look at. So you tend to lose it completely and focus facial animation in this area right here. But these characters are big, rough, their necks are as big as their heads, and we felt like their facial performance should extend all the way down to here, all the way down to their abdomen. So before they talk, we wanted their abs to tighten, so you felt they were gonna project. So they didn't just talk, they would bellow. And we wanted to see that, and we felt like their necks were incredibly important. We got a couple of people in who were really scrawny, really kind of skinny necks, and it was amazing how much crazy stuff goes on under the skin. We wanted to capture that. Facial performance. We knew going in we wanted to capture our actors. You would be an idiot to not want Willem Dafoe's facial performance, Samantha Morton's facial. You'd be a moron to not want it. But we knew we'd also want to augment that, because their faces didn't look exactly like the Tharks. So we built a system that would allow us to capture their faces. These are head casts. We scanned their heads and then printed the helmets in 3D. So they're not standard helmets, they're actually custom made. 2 cameras at 20 degrees offset gave us a semblance of 3D. Wasn't quite 3D, but allowed us to, a single camera gives you a flat plane to capture from. 2 allows you to track dots on their face in 2 angles and triangulate, and give you, and tell you how much the skin moves backwards in space, not just in 2 dimensions, which is quite useful. We then went and scanned their heads using a MOVA technique, multiple cameras, painted their faces with fluorescent makeup, which acts like 10,000 tiny markers. And they've got an array, if you imagine an array of about 15 different high-speed cameras all around them. They say certain words, in this case.
And shout.
All the boys ate a fish!
Good, cut, and shout.
All the boys ate a fish!
Good, cut, and shout.
All the boys...
So that's what we get from MOVA. It's a very high detailed moving mesh. It's not a rig. You can't animate that. It's just a piece of moving material. From that, we were able to extract, using custom proprietary software, extract all of the, what we call fact shapes, facial action coding system, which is quite an old sort of approach to designing a facial animation system. We were able to pull that out of this piece of dialogue. The dialogue was designed by the riggers as a piece of dialogue that was allowed the actor to hit all of the phonemes, or most of the phonemes that we thought we would need. We extracted that and we created a digital version of the character, which we then extracted again and used a translation device to go to a 3rd rig. This is where it gets really complicated, so bear with me. In the past, we've done facial capture and we've made the mistake, and I say it's a mistake, we've learned that if you try to go from an actor to a digital character and have one go to the other, the rigging tends to dictate how that works. So the facial action coding rig is a very technical rig, and animators hate it. They hate it because it's not a sensible approach for them. Animators think in terms of graphic shape, textural quality, and movement. They think like the line of a lips, move that. They don't think, I want to move that muscle. You know, they're not experts necessarily. Some of them are, but most of them don't think that way. So they just want to grab parts of the face and move it around. So we designed a gap in our facial rigging. Am I losing you? Are you still with me? Okay, good. All right. So we got a real actor. We capture his face, and then we create a digital version of his face. That rig is not very animatable. You can do it, but it's not very friendly. We wanted a really fast animator-friendly rig because Andrew wanted to work with the animators and really push things. But we couldn't have our artists get caught up in technicalities. We just wanted to be very reactive and work in an intuitive way. So we built their rig the way they wanted to build it. And then the smart bit was we wrote a translation device that took this animation and put it onto these controls. So the animator could start with a capture process that gave them accurate lip sync and some of the nuances of Willem or Samantha's performance. And then we'd show that to Andrew and he'd say, I kind of like this take, but what about we take the eyes from this take, put it into this one, then it got kind of complex. But we were able to do that. We were able to pull in, all the animators could choose from all the takes and offer it back up to Andrew. It was a very collaborative process. But having that speed and ease of use was really key. And in the past, we hadn't made that break. And we hadn't identified that it was really smart to have artists work in ways that they're comfortable. Wow, I did it. I explained it. I didn't get a nosebleed or anything. So while we did that stuff, the technical stuff, we went and did...
Good cut
so this
and
is a
shout.
combination of the transfer.
All the boys ate a fish!
Good cut
Plus
and
animation.
shout.
All the boys!
What you'll notice on here is all of the tendons on his neck are already on.
All the
Right?
boys!
So when we
ate
got
a
our models in,
fish!
Good cut
everything was on,
and
as
shout.
if he was like
All the boys!
doing this
ate
all the
a
time.
fish!
So we had to do a
cut
pass
and shout.
to soften all that, take it all out, and then add it back in later in
Good
animation
cut
terms.
and shout.
So that was another
All the
learning
boys
curve. Typically,
ate a
we got
fish.
models that were just
Good
ripped
cut
all the
and
time, like
shout.
they'd been working out all day. So we had to immediately
Good
soften
cut
the geometry
and shout.
and find ways to add that stuff back in.
Ate a fish!
Good cut.
This is kind of a cool little video the animators made. We knew going in, here's the sort of controversial thing for me as an animator. The use of motion capture is a sort of a dirty secret not even a secret, it's just dirty. In animation terms, trying to get really good animators to come to work on a show where you're using motion capture is really hard. Because animators don't see it as animation, they see it as a different thing. And it's like acquiring a whole bunch of stuff and then having to work through it as opposed to starting from fresh and a clean slate. And that's the way animators like to work. So they don't like to use it. It also kind of muddies the water in terms of what they can put on their show reel and say, well, I did this, but you look at it and go, but is that motion capture? Is it not? So it's very difficult for a prospective employer or your boss to see exactly what you did. So it was very, very sensitive to it. But the way we got around it, we knew we wanted to use the tool because the movie was too big to hand animate everything. So we bought into this system called Moven, designed by a company called Exens. And it's a very, they'll hate me saying this, but it's a very low fidelity system that doesn't use optical. So you can wear it anywhere. I could wear it now in this room, in a dark room, and capture my movement because it uses tiny IMUs. Or it's like a, you know the Wii, Nintendo Wii? You know the controller? It's like the controller. It's got the same stuff inside it, but much more expensive. And you've got lots of them all over your body, and each one knows where the other one is, but it doesn't know where you are in space. So it's sort of a trick way of capturing motion. But it's really easy to use, and you can do it anywhere. Take it home. You can walk around the building. So you don't need a dedicated special space to do it. And what I wanted to do was have all of our animators act every shot out for themselves. And there is a sort of mistaken idea that animators are like these bubbly, extrovert people, and they're not actually. They're really shy, most of them. So trying to get them to use this system was like, it took me months and months and months. But it added up to this video here. It shows you how it worked, actually. Get to wear a really sexy lycra outfit. The animators would get cast their shots on a Monday. They'd go down to the room. We had a dedicated space for them to go into that was private, so they could perform and not feel embarrassed. They'd animate the scene, see it immediately as a Thark. They could do 10, 15, 20 takes, and myself and the other leads could see it later on after lunch, and we could go, I like this, I like that. So very quickly, what happens is you get, the more comfortable you get acting it out, the better the performance is going to be because you feel it, so you know how it feels to be a Thark. But you get, because you do multiple takes, you can pick the best bits and then edit them together. Then it would go to their desktop and they would hand animate and only use it as reference. We didn't use the data at all. It was too messy. But it got the animators to get to the most important thing was getting the best choice for the scene as quickly as possible. If you don't do this method and you keyframe, and I'll get through this very quickly, but I have so I'm waving a flag about this for years now, but if you don't do it and you keyframe, it takes longer. And when something takes a long time, it takes me days to make this, right? Let me sculpt it. I sculpt, and isn't it great? And then I show it and you hate it. Oh, and you give me notes. Can you change this, change that? Like, what I should really do is throw it away and do it again. That's what I should really do. But you don't. If you've invested 3, 4, 5 days, you go, oh, is that it? No. Oh, what about that? No. And you end up pushing this thing around and being reluctant to do it and not wanting to do it when you should really just roll it up like a sketch and throw it away and do it again. This method lets you do that. It's throwaway because you've not invested any time doing digital yet. It's just you trying stuff out. And we make that first process really quick and dirty. And it's amazing. All of the animators' work came up. All of the choices looked better. All of the performances got better. And then the animation part just came later and it was much more straightforward. Anyway, that's my speech on that. I did like, what is this? Oh yeah, here's a breakdown of how we use these techniques with a shot. So that's Thomas Hayden Church. He's wearing a backpack and it's quite rigid. So his physical performance isn't amazing, but we got the idea of what he was trying to do in the scene. We pulled out the facial capture. You can see the digital version of his head and then the transfer to the Thark version of his head. The animator went in then and pushed it a little bit broader just to make it meatier and fleshier because the creature's face was a lot more bold. Start with the clean plate. The actor stepped out for this one. The animator went and videotaped himself doing something a little bit more elaborate because the director wanted it to feel bigger. We liked it, and then we sent him down to capture. So this is the animator's own capture. You can see it's very dirty, it's very messy, interpenetration and so forth. But we showed that to Andrew, and he liked it. He liked where it was going. He liked the way he played the frame. His head comes in from the right, swings to the left, settles into the frame in a much nicer way. And by doing all of these very quick and dirty passes early on, shooting video reference and then the Moven reference, we're able to get to a solution very quickly, and the process of finishing that animation pass became very straightforward. There you go. So that's the process in action. And you can see the end result was very similar in tone to what the actor did, but it was just bigger. And Andrew was all about, sometimes he was very precious about what the actors did, and sometimes he's like, no, I didn't like that. They're just there for reference for where the head should be. Let's try something different. I will talk about one aspect of what we did that I think was fantastic, called shot sculpt. So we spent all this time and money developing these sexy rigs, all of these tools for animators, all of these things like skin sliding and muscle bulges and all of that. But in the best case, you always end up pushing those rigs really much further than they can actually go. And one of the classic mistakes is to try to overbuild your rigs and your tools to be able to do everything. That takes a long time and it costs a lot of money. Sometimes you're better off just making them robust and then dealing with special cases when situations get too far. In this case, we had one guy, Christian Bull, who's an insanely talented modeler, and he was our anatomy expert. And we would bring him in at the end of the pipeline. So he would model and rig, come to us, we'd animate. All the sexy stuff is in process. Then he'd go in and just fix it or just add a little to it just to make it sing. So these are some examples of what he did. So if you look on the left, you'll see what came out of animation. So this is a scene where one Thark is grabbing another Thark and forcing her to look down at her dad. If you look on the right, you can see what he's added is all the flesh bulging to make that grip look much more violent. And even the hand that's on her head, you can see the skin bunch around it. And it really adds to the drama of the scene. So this is a situation where he's elevated the drama of the shot just through sculpting on top of what we've done. This is the end shot.
Sculpting, you mean pushing the muscle system?
No, just taking the mesh, the output mesh, which has all the muscles and everything on it, and then just baking that off and just adding sculptural detail to it and animating that. What I love about this is it's really low tech. It's an incredibly talented person just plugged into the system and being able to elevate all of the great tech to another level. And it was like the simplest part of our process, but for me, it had the biggest impact. If we look at this shot, here you can see before and after. So the before, that's the before, that's the after. So it's one shot where he's trying to kill a guy he's using 2 swords, he's going to chop his head off. And Andrew's like, oh, it's missing something. It's got to feel like Arnold doing it. So he pushed it, and everybody freaked out because he was off model, so to speak. It didn't look like Tars anymore. But when you watch it in the movie, you feel that he's just, he's on steroids. And it worked great. And Andrew was cool with it. He's like, I don't care how big it is. It just feels really aggressive. And that's what he wanted. So again, that was augmenting the scene. This is a scene where Sola has been punished. She's been branded. And we have to push her arms up over her head and actually force her head down to get her, because she's got such a long neck. We had to literally break the rig. And you can see that's what was sculpted, and that's what we started with. If you look at all that crazy detail, and it's even animating and tensing, and that was one sculptor, and literally 2 days' work, and just made the shot gorgeous. And I love that as well, and I think, you can put all your money into tech, but you can't beat having really incredibly strong artists that, if you know how to use them right, it can really have a big payoff. I did want to show a very quick video if I have time. This is what it's like to work with Andrew Stanton. So oftentimes animators are like, what's he like? What is it like working with a live action director? What was great about Andrew was
we either thin
his
it out
feedback.
and make it feel like a single wrap that's
This is
tighter
on set in Utah.
and not as lumpy. And
Videotape everything and sent back to base camp.
Much more thinner, almost G-string kind of a thing, and it's more about the flap like the proof was.
So for things like double turnarounds, designs,
So in other words, it was
it really came into his own.
Was it still? Hey, look at the proof.
He did animation painting. Every feedback session he gave us was recorded, and the artist could actually see
That's the thing I'm saying. It's like maybe
dudes have to filter through different supervisors and leads. I thought that was really,
She's
really
done
cool.
so much stuff with Carter over this whole journey that she's
just the animators.
I wish he would listen to. I wish Dad would listen to him, but I'm not sure what. He's right, and I'm not sure. So there's just be that sort of anxious empathy, coming across from her. You don't want her worried like she's scared, but you just want her invested. Like, listen to him, Dad. Listen, Jesus. But it's not my place to insist, right? And but you want him to like. You want Dad to agree. Right? So you just want to feel that in the family table. And then you buy your pets kind of psychic with whatever energy you're at. So if Carter's all tense and stuff, I buy the dog. It's just there. Where are we going? What are we doing? And he's just kind of happy right now on this side. So those two things jumped out at me blocking wise.
We gave him some simple tools so he could draw right on the screen for us. And they were all saved. And again, the animators could go back to their desks and get that direct information. But what you'll notice is he's not talking technical at all. Right, and this is a guy, he's technical, and he can do it. He doesn't talk technical when he's talking artists. He's just talking about why the shot's in the film, what the purpose of the shot is, what the dramatic need is.
And whose shot is this, Francesco? Yeah. Hi. It feels like you might even be able to get away with doing it twice. So you just feel like, where's everyone? You listening, Dad? Just is he like it's like a 1 and a 2 or a 1 and a 1.5? Just do that one here, and then a smaller glance, just to make sure that everybody's listening to what this guy's saying. I'm doing this for everybody else to hear, right?
And I think that was, I wanted to show this because Andrew is performance-driven. He was an actor before he became a director, before he became an animator. And he was great on set with the actors, very, very comfortable. We were all worried about how he would handle that, being from animation, but it was second nature to him. But it was great on the back end of it. We were able to bring the animators right in, have them sit right with him, and he was just really inspiring to work for. And he never talked technical. There's nothing worse than a backseat driver saying, "Don't set a keyframe here," and do it. He would never talk about that. He trusted everybody on his team to know all that stuff. But he just always wanted to make sure that you as an artist knew why the shot was in the film, and what the dramatic need was and what the performance, why it was driving in that particular direction. And he helped us deliver the movie on time. We had over 800 people working on this film at our company, but he was really the catalyst to inspire us to do it, but he helped us deliver it as well because he knows exactly what he's doing. So I'm going to wrap it up there, actually, just to give everybody else a chance to talk. But thank you very much.